you write through the Bush administration, the Obama and first Trump administration, and you mention Reagan and Clinton. I mean, this spans a lot of time. The story doesn't span a lot of time, but these ideas, these complexities that we've been dealing with as a country, it spans multiple decades and administrations.
One of the things about the global war on terror that I think that I learned, I guess I knew it intellectually, but you really feel it when you read the book, which is just the unrelenting, constant threat of terrorists and terrorism. And you really, in reading it all in one place, even though it's about this one case, all these other cases are mentioned and weaved throughout, and you can debate strategies and philosophies, whether we should have been in Iraq, whether we should have been in Afghanistan, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing that's very clear is just the unrelenting threat. And this was not intentional. This wasn't the purpose of the book, but there is this subtext of how different administrations deal with terrorism.
Is that much of it? That's not much of a change for you, right?
My name is Kerry Kite. I used to load bombs in the Air Force, and now I'm a writer, a filmmaker, and an entrepreneur. Through using the post-9/11 GI Bill to go to college, working hourly jobs to pay the bills, and freelancing my way into a career, I've studied what it takes to successfully transition from service to civilian, and that study has become a conversation. On this podcast, I speak to other veterans, successful artists, and entrepreneurs about their transition, what they did well, where they failed, what they learned, and most importantly, how they applied their skills. Episode 164 features CNN's Jake Tapper. Jake's latest book, Race Against Terror, Chasing an Al-Qaeda Killer at the Dawn of the Forever War, chronicles a little-known true crime story that takes place during the global war on terror, spanning the battlefields of Afghanistan and multiple administrations. Jake and I spoke about keeping history thrilling, entertaining, and accessible for his readers. Welcome. This is Veteran Made. Our merch store is live at store.veteranmadeproductions.com. Grab hats, t-shirts, and hoodies in both performance and tri-blend cotton fabrics. Use code VM-5OFF for 5% off your purchase. Veteran Made is also sponsored by Go Pills, a military-grade nootropic that contributes to brain health over time. Use code VM15 at checkout for 15% off. I get my collagen protein from Bubs Naturals, where you can use code VETERANMADE, all one word, at checkout for 20% off your order. We're also proud to partner with True Made Foods, which makes condiments free from added sugar and sweetened with real foods. Use code VET at checkout for 15% off. We love socks in this house. I get my wife new socks every Christmas. More importantly, we love American-grown and made socks. Use code VETERANMADE15 at rucksocks.com for 15% off. And lastly, I end my day with Rack Out from Bravo Actual to maintain quality sleep, resulting in a well-rested body and mind. Use code VETERANMADE with a space between the words at checkout for 15% off your order. Enjoy the episode.
All right. Good morning from the great state of Ohio for me. Good morning from Washington, D.C. Jake Tapper, welcome to Veteran Made.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much.
Absolutely. All right. We're here talking about Race Against Terror. Absolutely loved the book.
Thank you.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. And knowing a bit about your background as a writer, kind of blending historical fiction with some thriller elements. I'd love to start there with your process to, obviously I read The Outpost during COVID actually, and that had some of those elements to it as well. And we saw that kind of put on film. And then you write the thriller series as well. And then now you're kind of blending this historical fiction with thriller aspects. Talk to us a little bit about the process to bring those two genres together.
Well, I learned a lot from writing fiction, from the historical fiction. I wrote a series of books, The Hellfire Club, The Devil May Dance, and All the Demons Are Here, which have to do with a fictitious congressman and his family interacting with real life figures from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And what I learned as a writer from writing those books, I tried to use when writing this book, which is nonfiction, a true story about an ambush in Afghanistan and a race to track down the killer and prove a case against one of the Al-Qaeda killers involved in that case. And it's a true story, but I wanted to use some of the writing techniques that I learned from the fiction to make it as compelling as possible. I'm so glad that you read The Outpost, but sometimes I look back at anything I do TV or writing, and I always look at things that I wish I'd done better. And one of the things about The Outpost that I wish I had done differently is I guess I wish it was shorter. I wish it was more accessible to people, because it's a big book. It's like 500 pages. And I mean, I felt that the weight of the responsibility to tell the stories of these servicemen and women when I wrote that book. But in retrospect, maybe more people, I always think maybe more people would have read it if I edited more, if I made it shorter, if I made it an easier read, a more compelling read, just in terms of writing techniques. Even if you, break it up into more chapters, so that people can like read 7 pages instead of thinking, oh God, I got 40 more pages in this chapter. So those lessons I learned, I tried to apply to this book, which is a true story, a true crime story. And that has to do with editing, and it has to do with really being as disciplined as possible. I know a lot of your viewers and listeners are writers, and just really trimming the fat as much as possible and making sure that the experience is for the reader as much as possible.
So how do you balance that with the journalistic aspect to get the details right and to get all the elements that need to be on the page and in the reader's mind as they're reading, with that accessibility and excitement, especially with a story like this?
So one of the things that you do in daily journalism is you're constantly sourcing. And one of the things that you can do in nonfiction is not do that and just have at the back of the book, a list of interviews or footnotes or whatever, so that if people are interested in the sourcing, they have a way to find out. And I think that it wouldn't work in daily journalism because people are very skeptical, and also it's the first draft and that sort of thing. But in a book, in nonfiction, I think readers are more willing to give you the benefit of the doubt and assume you know what you're talking about, and that and as long as you have the in the background, in the back of the book, an explanation as to how for instance, what happened in a battle. One of the most difficult things to write, as I'm sure you know and your viewers and listeners know, is battle scenes are incredibly difficult because you have 50 different people and 50 different perspectives, and it's really difficult. And I learned that the hard way when writing The Outpost. Anyway, so in this case, I just figured, like, look, they're going to take my word for it. They are coming onto this journey with me. I interviewed, almost every single person mentioned in the book, I interviewed for the book, and I let service members and others read drafts to make sure I was as accurate as humanly possible. And so that I think is a freedom that writers, if you're doing nonfiction, need to give yourself. Now, obviously, if you're writing about something very controversial and there are lots of different perspectives and people disagree, that's a different story. But if you're writing in this book, just because I really made sure that the narrative was one that everybody agreed on, I just trusted, look, the reader just wants to hear the story, and if they want to know about the sourcing, they can read the back.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, there's true crime elements being billed as a true crime thriller, right? And I'm not sure if that was one of your intentions or if that's more on the publishing side, but it has those elements to it as well. And we're living through a time where people are obsessed with true crime, whether it's podcasts on road trips, or flipping on the streamers and seeing true crime after true crime after true crime.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because this story is about the only foreign terrorist ever tried in a U.S. criminal court for killing U.S. service members on a foreign battlefield. It's never happened before, and they're going to try it now with an Abbey Gate conspirator, but that trial hasn't even started yet. So it is a crime, although it is, it might not conform to our pre-existing biases about what is a crime, because we think, and even some of the family members of the victims who were killed during this ambush were confused. Like, how is this a crime? It was, Al-Qaeda fighters killing Americans in Afghanistan. That's a crime. but it is, and so it is a true crime story, even if it doesn't conform to our theory of like Laura Palmer killed on Twin Peaks or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and obviously that through line and the complexities there are a big part of this story. The military and DoD had their own experience going through the GWAT, right? And the GWAT isn't over, right? Just with the fall of Afghanistan, right? I think a lot of folks kind of feel like it is, but it's not. We have troops deployed and we have people still out there doing that work. And it turns out the Justice Department had their own experience with the GWAT as well across multiple administrations. And you write through the Bush administration, the Obama and first Trump administration, and you mentioned Reagan and Clinton. I mean, this spans a lot of time. The story doesn't span a lot of time, but these ideas, these complexities that we've been dealing with as a country, it spans multiple decades and administrations. So twofold question. One, as a journalist who's been covering the GWAT for a good portion of your career, what was it like to distill, not that you exactly did this, but what was it like to distill the global war on terror down and look at it through this specifically narrow lens? I say narrow in a positive way.
Yeah. So it was really interesting. So first of all, one of the things about the global war on terror that I think that I learned, I guess I knew it intellectually, but you really feel it when you read the book, which is just the unrelenting, constant threat of terrorists and terrorism. And it's just constant. And the difficulty of all of those who have to protect us, whether it's the service members or the police or the prosecutors or the FBI, and just how this threat stream is never ending. And you when you meet a character like Dave Bitcower is an assistant U.S. attorney, he's a prosecutor, he's one of the main characters in the book. He had worked on the prosecution of an al-Shabaab, an American who went to Africa and blew himself up for al-Shabaab, a terrorist organization. And you really, in reading it all in one place, even though it's about this one case, all these other cases are mentioned and weaved throughout, and you see how difficult this job is to stop terrorism and to protect the country from terrorism. And you can debate strategies and philosophies, whether we should have been in Iraq, whether we should have been in Afghanistan, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing that's very clear is just the unrelenting threat. And this was not intentional, but one of the subjects of the book, one of the characters, noted that at 3 different times in the book, people who are trying to prosecute Spin Ghoul, the terrorist that I focus on in this book, go to memorials for other terrorist actions, whether Oklahoma City, right-wing terrorism in the United States, domestic terrorism, or abroad. And that also was just coincidental, not intentional, but illustrative of the never-ending threat. On a secondary level, this wasn't the purpose of the book, but there is this subtext of how different administrations deal with terrorism. Because one of the reasons why this was such a challenge for these prosecutors, Spin Ghoul is picked up in the Mediterranean by Italian soldiers during the Arab Spring. He's on a refugee boat and they get him, and he says he's with Al-Qaeda, and he starts talking about the Americans he's killed and what he's done. And the Italians call the Americans and say, "Have you heard of this guy Spin Ghoul?" They have. Come get him. But it's 2011, not 2007. So Obama's president, not Bush. So there's a whole new approach to the war on terror. One, nobody is going to Guantanamo, so you can't just take them to Guantanamo and then worry about it later. 2, Obama wants these people tried in criminal courts, these terrorists tried in criminal courts, which is very controversial at the time. Not so much right now in 2025, but in 2011, 2012, hugely controversial. People were terrified, as if these guys were, supervillains that would walk into the streets of Manhattan and start killing people with their thoughts. People were really, really scared. It was only a decade after 9/11. So the different approaches to the war on terror are also kind of a subject in this book, although not in an academic way, just as this is what they had to deal with.
Yeah, I was struck by that reading it. I enlisted in 2006, deployed twice to Afghanistan, once President Bush's last surge, and then once during President Obama's first surge.
Where were you surged? Where in Afghanistan?
I was at Bagram, so I was a support troop. I didn't see direct combat. We had some mortar attacks and things like that. But during my second deployment, we supported our airframe. I loaded bombs on F-15s, E models. So our close air support was supporting the Marines as they were going and taking the Marja province.
Wow.
So pretty kinetic for them,
Yeah.
and pretty high up tempo.
Bagram's pretty kinetic too. I mean, as I'm sure your veteran viewers and readers, listeners know, but maybe not necessarily civilians. Having been to Bagram, like there's incoming at all hours of the day, anytime. I mean,
you're not exactly safe, right? You might be safer, but not exactly safe. And it's interesting. It's like my personal politics have morphed over the years, kind of enlisting and then experiencing it, I would say secondhand, right? Not seeing direct combat, but secondhand. But talking to those guys, I mean, we would go into the rooms and watch the videos from our avionics systems for the missions that our guys were going on. Sometimes we dropped bombs and sometimes we didn't. And we talked to the operators that were on the ground out there, and they would explain to us what they were doing and how they were doing it and what they were going after and why they needed the different platforms that we were loading and all those things. And then I got out in 2010, used the GI Bill, and got into a career, in filmmaking and media. And then so was removed from it. But through hosting this podcast, I have lots of conversations with people that have been serving from 2010 on. And so the more removed we are from the fight, so to speak, and then the more removed we are from working for the different administrations, then you start to get a taste of the way that different administrations and different tactics and strategies are used and viewed and spun and all of these different things. But you distilled it all in a really interesting way, and you leaned into each person's perspective and sort of allowing it to play out the way that they saw it, and you blended it into a cohesive narrative. The thing that struck me was less on the policy side and more on the defense and prosecutor side. So you had some characters that started by defending certain defendants, and then they started to have experiences and said, okay, I need to go over to the prosecutorial side now.
Yeah, Al Hamdani. You're talking about Al Hamdani. Al Hamdani was a defense attorney in Texas. Fascinating character. He's important. So one of the things that was interesting about this book that I didn't know I was going to find, one of the joys of researching a book is discovering things you didn't know. And I mean, I knew I was going to tell the story of this prosecution. I didn't know how interesting the characters were going to be, but there were so many characters that were just interesting. And I felt, take a page to tell their story because they're interesting. And it also is this American mosaic of just like people from all different walks of life, Jews, Christians, Muslims, all working to protect the country one way or the other, whether they're defense attorneys protecting our ideals or prosecutors trying to protect the American people. Two different FBI agents, both women who were Muslim, was something I didn't expect. And it was a joyful discovery because it really does illustrate how much Al-Qaeda and terrorists have twisted a religion as opposed to being, fairly representing the religion. But in any case, Al Hamdani is such an interesting character. He is, in the book, he is a guy who is inside the Justice Department during the Obama years, helping the prosecutors in Brooklyn get permission to extradite Spingool and prosecute him. Because at the time, it was not a given that Obama would okay it. Because what happens if they bring him to the United States and they lose the case? All of a sudden, the guy is in the United States and his stated goal is to kill as many Americans as possible. And Al Hamdani is fascinating because, as you note, he's a defense attorney. And then one of his defendants, one of his clients, lies to him. And he starts to see John Ashcroft and the Bush administration's war on terror differently, which is not that there weren't excesses and the like, but that this is a real threat. And so he has a conversion, and he joins the the prosecutor's side, which was just a fascinating story that I did not see coming.
So when you approach a book like this and researching for it, you have an idea for, okay, I'm going to tell this story. You knew what happened, right? You knew the beginning, the middle, and the end, but you're talking right now about lots of different discoveries that you're making along the way. So how flexible are you in the format of the book or in the different beats of the book? Like how does that manifest in your writing process as you make these discoveries? Are you taking them and plugging them back in? Are you rewriting? Like how do you reconcile those things as you discover them?
Yes, all of that. I'm entirely flexible and entirely open-minded. And as you know, the book is not a treatise on here are my views on terrorism and here is what I think should happen. Who cares? Like, no, I don't care what my opinion is on that. I just care about the story. I'm a historian, not a polemicist. So I just want to tell the story. And there are different people in this book who have very different views of the war on terrorism, whether it's Dr. Jess Ganam, who is a psychiatrist out in San Francisco who testifies on behalf of Spin Ghoul, or some of the more hard-ass prosecutors. And my mind is completely open and completely in service to the story and the reader. I just want the reader to learn the same interesting things that I'm learning in as compelling a way as possible. And that is the only, other than being accurate and truthful, that is my only master when it comes to this. I just want people to read a good yarn. When I first heard this story, I was just like, that's an incredible story. Has anybody told this story before? And they hadn't. The prosecution of Spin Ghoul had been covered. But what's really most interesting about Spin Ghoul's case is the sleuthing, is how they track down all the evidence, which is like very CSI. It's very procedural in a great sense. Like, how did they find physical evidence to tie this terrorist who didn't even know what month it was when he engaged in the ambush to the specific deaths of these two specific service members? So yeah, no, my mind is completely open.
Yeah, those particular scenes, like that's where the true crime kind of elements come in, and I don't know if this book has been optioned. I hope it has, or I hope it will, because I'm a screenwriter and a filmmaker by trade, so I see things visually, right? Especially when I read a great book, whether it's nonfiction or fiction or thriller or whatever, I'm always kind of seeing what I would do with the screenplay, what I would do with the framing of the shots and all those things. And those scenes that you're describing, like they're so cinematic and they're so dramatic. And I don't mean that in a pithy sense. I very much felt the humanity of the FBI agents who needed to get this evidence, and the service members who had to decide whether or not they were going to part with these things, and the family members. This is a lot of times all they have left of these people or of that time. They represent those memories. It's something they can look at, touch, and feel that brings those memories back, whether they want those memories or not, consciously. And so those sort of true crime elements where they're traveling all across the country trying to grab these. What was it like from a research standpoint, speaking to the service members and speaking to their families and bringing up those moments for them?
It's always difficult to interview people, Gold Star families, and it's always difficult to interview service members because by definition you are asking them about the worst day of their lives. So that's always a challenge. But by the same token, that you are telling a story that they know that they are sophisticated enough to understand, hey, this guy wants to make my son who was killed in Afghanistan, he wants to put him in a book and tell his story, and people will now know his name that would not have known it. So there is that level of understanding that I am, and thankfully I'd written The Outpost, and so I had a certain level of trust and credibility with these service members that maybe, when I wrote The Outpost, it came out in 2012, it was before there had been, such a long sustained campaign against news media and journalists by the left and the right, but in particular President Trump. So, which makes your job harder. But because I had The Outpost, the hardest right most conservative, tough guy, service member, veteran was an open book, because they knew the outpost, they knew I had done it right and I would do it right again. And I'll tell you, those stories were the most, I mean, hearing about the humanity of all of the individuals, not just the Gold Star moms and sisters and brother, but boy, I mean, they're just, there are some scenes in the book that are just like, will haunt me forever. And same thing with the Outpost. There's scenes in the Outpost that I still think about on a very regular basis. Just to give one example, there was Doc Simmons was the medic, obviously. I think he was actually a physician assistant, to be technical, but he oh no, he was a medic. I'm sorry, he was a medic. Anyway, Doc Simmons, because you guys all have the very clever original nickname Doc for your medics. Doc Simmons it was not only the guy for healthcare there, but he was also very religious Christian, a very devout Christian. And on his bag, on his kit, he had an illustration of Jesus, I think, washing the feet of the Romans or something like that, is it taking care of a Roman, his enemy. And that was how he went into service. He's there to serve all of God's children, whether Americans or Christians or Al-Qaeda. Like, we're all human, and he was there for that. And there's a very poignant moment after the ambush where he rips that illustration off his kit, because the battle had hardened his heart, and he no longer felt that way about the enemy. And it's the kind of thing that if you read it in fiction, you'd be like, okay, that's fine, it's nice. But like, the fact that it's real, and it was, I think about it all the time. I think about how this deeply religious, wonderful guy, how his heart had been hardened by the ambush. And there are just a million moments like that. There's another one. I don't want to spoil the book. I want everybody to read it, but I don't think this takes away from it, because my bumbling inarticulateness hopefully is corrected in the book. But Renly Dennis, who is the brother of Jared Dennis, one of the Americans killed in the ambush, his statement during the trial, when your victim impact statements, about when he essentially forgives Spingul the terrorist, inspired by a Frenchman whose wife had been killed at the Bataclan by ISIS, in a Facebook essay and then book called "You Will Not Have My Hate." You cannot have my hate. And he's inspired by that, and he gives a statement, also just incredibly moving. And the humanity of these people, related to the worst possible thing that could happen to you other than yourself dying, someone you love dying, is just, I feel very, very fortunate that I'm able to bring these stories to a larger audience, because it is such a reminder of the beauty of humanity, whether it's forgiveness or grief.
Well, I think this is why accessibility, to use your word from earlier, and entertainment, which is a word that I'm going to use now, that's why there's so much value in this kind of storytelling. Because if you're just writing a nonfiction book, a history book, where you're listing facts and making sure the sentences sound good together, that's not going to have the same kind of impact as a story like this, where you are investigating all of the complexities and all of the humanity of everyone involved, and not taking a side, so to speak, and not in the sort of like binary sense, but in the sense of, here are all the things that happened. Let me write this in the most human way possible, make this as entertaining, as accessible as possible, so that the reader can learn that this affects everybody, and it affects everybody differently at all levels of government, all the way down, highest levels of government, all the way down to the service members, and then over to their families as well. That kind of accessibility and entertainment makes it so that so that we have this connection
Yeah.
to the story and see that there's more to this than just, hey, Reagan did this and then Clinton did this and then
Right.
Bush did this and then Obama did this and then Trump did this and then undid this. It's like that's sort of what we hear and see from from pundits and from people who want to spin these things publicly. Rather, this is an investigation, and at the human level. That's the thing that struck me the most, was just the way that you wove all of those things together, and it flowed narratively, which was great. But it just made me think and feel a bunch of different things and question things and want to go explore more things. I mean, I have my notes here. It's like some of these are notes for what I wanted to ask you today, and then some of them are notes for, hey, go research this, go investigate this, go look into this.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you were there when this thing happened, or not there, but somewhere close. Like what was going on? Like, what do I think about that now at 37 versus how I thought about it at 19? So I don't know, not a question, just a
No, I completely agree with you, and that was one. I wrote about Afghanistan before, but that was more writing about when I wrote The Outpost, and that was more writing about combat. But this book is more about terrorism, because even though the attack, the ambush, is in the surroundings of combat, it is Al Qaeda doing it, not the Taliban, not local insurgents. These are absolutely foreign terrorists, and it is being investigated and prosecuted as a criminal terrorist matter. And the idea of terrorism is one that has almost become just another issue, on the bullet points of healthcare, economy, terrorism. And the truth is, as you know, like, these are very human stories about real people swept up in a horrific moment. And one of the things that I was able to that this book was able to provide, just because of all the court records, and because Spingool told, before he came to America and stopped cooperating, he had just gotten out of a Libyan prison and was very eager to talk about how important he was and who he was. And so we have his life story. And so I'm not saying that I'm sympathetic to Spingool at all, because I'm not, but we also hear his story, his journey, how he ended up, a guy who is, his nation of origin is Niger, but he was born in Saudi Arabia. How does he end up in Afghanistan shooting at Americans? Like, what is that path? What was that journey like? Again, not sympathetically, but just as a matter of fact, like, this is how these people all converged.
Well, I mean, not to put words in your mouth, but I think somewhat sympathetically, in the sense of, like, you want to know and understand. I mean, this is essentially what the argument has been about the global war on terror since before it technically and officially started. I mean, this is what we've watched different administrations and different representatives of those administrations argue about for decades now. Does it matter to understand where these people come from, why they have the beliefs that they have? What led them to this place? Some people say yes, and others say no. Let's just go kill them all. I mean, I think of that Jamie Foxx movie, The Kingdom, where it's bookended with that whisper. One person whispers I think he whispers in Jennifer Garner's character's ear, like, we're going to go kill them all. And then at the end, the terrorist says the same thing. We're going to kill them all. And this is, I mean,
Peter Berg is so brilliant, and
unbelievable.
Nobody does terrorism movies like Peter Berg. He's just so, I mean, he's great on so many levels, but like his movie about the Boston Marathon bombing, The Kingdom. I mean, he obviously, did he do Lone Survivor? I think he did Lone Survivor. Yeah. I mean, he's just so good.
Yeah. I got to get him on here. But anyway, like I said, that is the point. Like, these are all human beings. And again, I'm now going to say what you said, not sympathetic to the people that are committing acts of terrorism, but I do want to understand where they come from and what led them to this place, because we can't listen, we need to solve some of these problems kinetically, but we can't solve all of them.
No, you can't kill your way. You can't kill an ideology.
Right.
An ideology exists. I mean, this is one of the things that Netanyahu and Israel have to deal with right now. Like, they think that they're killing Hamas, and they want to get rid of Hamas, and as a military goal, one can understand it, but like, how many more members of Hamas are they creating with their attempt to kill, all the surviving members of Hamas? And that's it's an uncomfortable thing to say, because then people will accuse you of X, Y, or Z. But we can't get rid of an ideology that threatens us if we don't understand why people are being drawn to the ideology. And it's not enough to say, like you said, we can't kill our way out of it. To understand why Spingul was drawn to this, you understand that he's born in poverty. He's Black in Saudi Arabia, so he's dealing with racism, and he's a peasant, he's a pauper, and the stories that he is hearing as a child are not the stories of soccer players or Michael Jordan. They are of the Mujahideen fighting in Chechnya, or what the Mujahideen, the holy warriors who are legends in his neighborhood, did in Afghanistan against the former Soviet Union. And these are their heroes. And they think, it's interesting. This wasn't in the book because I couldn't figure out a place to put it. But Dave Bitcower, one of the prosecutors, because one of the questions that people always ask is, why did Spingul early on confess to so many things? And one of the answers is because he'd been in a Libyan prison. But another, so he was just like, he'd been, driven a little mad from being in that Libyan prison for 5 years. But beyond that, so Bitcower went to Yale. And when he was at Yale, he wrote for the Yale Daily News. He interviewed Ron Darling, who was a former Yale pitcher who went on to win the World Series with the Mets. And Ron Darling, when he was at Yale, had pitched a no-hitter. And Bitcower interviewed him. And even though he'd gone on and won a World Series with the Mets, he remembered every detail about that that college baseball game where he pitched a no-hitter. And Bitcower says that Spingul reminded him of Ron Darling in the sense that he remembered every detail about the ambush because it was one of the greatest days of his life in terms of his personal and professional accomplishments. Now, we think that's disgusting and we think that's horrific, but that's how he looked at it.
Yeah, it's that because he's a person, right? And we need to understand what drives us. And we're obviously at a spot and have been getting to a spot in our national discourse where we're doing the same thing that we shouldn't be doing, right? Not understanding where people are coming from and why they have positions that they have, right? Like, to keep it in the book and keep it in the story, right? Like, I'm reading this and I'm like, okay, I now have a better understanding of the Obama administration's approach, having read this book, as well as the Bush administration's approach, having read this book, which I think is obviously a net positive. And I'm curious about more of that, which is obviously a good thing as well. And we need to be able to understand. That's why there's so much value in the way our system works and voting somebody in every 4 years, because, hey, here's the argument for why I should approach what you listed earlier, right? Healthcare, economy, terrorism, war, all of these different things. Okay, cool. We have the argument. We have the belief structure in place. Now let's figure out what that actually means and how we want to adjust it and move forward, or how we want to keep doing it, right? And we've been in danger for a long time of losing the ability to do that here.
If you can't see the humanity in a human, then all is lost. I mean,
you're never going to solve the problems that need to be solved.
Yeah, I mean, and we see this. It's getting worse since Charlie Kirk was assassinated. But like, the idea that this has, for so many people, resulted in a cause for celebration, that this guy, a human, with a wife and 2 small children, was murdered, or that this has resulted on the right in a cause to hate more people and say they did this to him. I don't know who they is. I know this deeply disturbed, psychotic murderer, alleged, did this. I don't know who they is.
Right.
You know, even the idiots saying things on social media, you know, that are callous and awful had nothing to do with it, you know? So yes, we need the humanity, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to be respectful of your time. Did not get to my questions about your background as a writer.
Go ahead. We can. I'm okay. I have a. Let me look at my what time. We can keep going for a few more minutes.
Okay, sounds good. So you started as an artist. You still are an artist. You still draw and write cartoons. But you started as a writer and not necessarily as somebody on television, right? Which I think a lot of people misunderstand, right? Like, oh, this television personality is writing books. It's like, no, actually, this writer turned into a television personality. So I'm curious to hear how you balance those things now as you move through your career on both fronts now instead of just one of them.
Well, writing is central to everything I do, whether it's TV or I'm working on a graphic novel right now. It's not really a novel; it's nonfiction, but I'm working on that right now. It will be my first graphic novel, and it's about the Nazi Klaus Barbie and how he got caught in Bolivia how he got found in Bolivia in the 70s and caught and brought to France for criminal prosecution in the 80s. And much more, just about how he escaped Germany to begin with. And at the end of it, it's writing. It's all writing, and it's all getting as much information as you can, and then thinking about the structure of the presentation. And that structure, to me, is just very integral to any storytelling. And when people ask me for any writing advice, the two bits of advice I have are: one, writers write, so you need to write every day, at least 15 minutes. And whether that's research or, words on paper, whether it's dictating into your phone or Google Docs or Word, whether it's scribbling on a piece of paper, whatever it is, 15 minutes a day, every day. You have to do it. That's how you write. And then the second thing is, for me, George R.R. Martin says that there are two types of writers: gardeners and architects. Gardeners kind of just go out there and see what blooms, and architects have a structure. And I'm definitely a structure guy. And I just think that when you read up on structure and screenplays and novels and how they best work, and the narrative three act structure and the like, it's really, really important to have a structure. And that doesn't mean you can't deviate from it, and it doesn't mean you can't change it as you write, but having a structure just helps the process. Because if you outline 15 chapters, then you wake up and you're like, okay, what am I on? I'm on chapter 4, and this chapter is about this, and like, here I go. So it's all part of the same thing, because when I'm doing TV journalism, it's a different kind of structure, but it is also writing. And it's like, who, what, when, where, why, and how, and then telling the story, and trying to be fair and trying to give all the points of view and this and that, using sound so it's a little different, but it's all writing.
What's the value in trying new and different things and working in multiple genres and multiple approaches? There's a lot of my grandma was the probably biggest influence on me from an artistic perspective. She didn't write, but she read a lot. We would read a lot of the same books and then like basically do book reports together.
Oh, that's great. Wow.
A bunch of different genres, right? Like I love old films because of her, but she also would remind me, hey, popcorn fiction has its place too. There's value in all of it. And you work across a bunch of different media on that front. So what do you think the tactical value is in working in different media and applying the fundamental structures like you're talking about, but working in different outputs?
I think probably at the bottom, it's about setting challenges for myself and seeing if I can meet them, because of my hyperactive brain. Like the third novel I wrote, I wanted to try something. The first two were written in third person. Congressman Charlie Martyr got up that morning, blah, blah, blah. But the third novel, and people can debate which one's better or whatever, but the third novel I wrote in first person, alternating between two different characters, a brother and a sister. And it was just to see if I could do it, to try something new. Same thing with this graphic novel that I'm working on. The truth of the matter is, I thought this was a great story about Klaus Barbie, and there wasn't really an appetite for me to write it as a nonfiction book. Like, my agent wasn't particularly interested in it. He thought like that stuff had kind of been done. And it's true, there have been a lot of books written about the Nazis hiding in South America. But I had been looking for a graphic novel project because I missed drawing so much. And so I just decided to try to do that. And, the first 6 months I spent on it, it was garbage. I look back at the illustrations and the storytelling, and it was not good. But I found an editor from a publishing house, a graphic novel publishing house, who wanted to work with me, to learn how to do it, to learn how to do the drawing, to learn how to do the storytelling. And so it was an opportunity for me to learn. And I would just say, like, any opportunity I can have to learn how to do something, I grab.
That's great. I mean, and thinking too about the business side of it, right? I think a lot of writers, especially ones that haven't been published yet, think about just the art and just the output, which is important. It's fundamental. If you don't have ideas, mean nothing. If you don't execute them, there's nothing to publish, right? But you have to be thinking from a business standpoint as well. Like, is there a place for this in the market? I want to get this story out there, but the way that I would traditionally write it isn't going to work because somebody in the market has told me that. So how do I get this story told, and how do I connect with someone that will help me get this story told, that I can help them learn something as well, right? It's personal, it's business, it's artistic, it's kind of all the endeavors coming together.
Yeah, look, I mean, at the end of the day, you got to put butts in the seats, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you can write poetry or do paintings for yourself, and if that's enough, then God bless. But if you want people to read it or see it or hear it, there is a degree to which you need to figure out where people are and meet them where they are. And that, which is not to say you need to sell out or, write a buddy flick or whatever. It just means, like, you have to figure out what's the audience for this, and how do I meet that audience where they are. I know it's frustrating to write stuff that doesn't go anywhere. It still happens to me. It's not as though just because I've written New York Times bestsellers, that doesn't mean, like, anytime I want to write anything and people are going to publish it at all. Not at all. I just spent about 2 months working on a project that I think is going to go absolutely nowhere, a historical fiction project. And so, I mean, it just, that happens to everybody.
Of course. And I mean, do you save those ideas and figure out ways that you can then use them in the future? Or is that something you just put away and say, hey, didn't work, I'm going to move on to the next thing?
Well, they're always saved, but I don't know that they're ever going to come back, right? I mean, there were so many books I pitched in my 20s and 30s that went nowhere. And like I said, I just worked on a treatment for a film that I think is probably going to go nowhere, that I spent a couple months on. And I mean, I could turn the camera around and show you all these are all the books I did research on to research that project. And, but at the end of the day, like, if the worst thing that happens is I learned about something, and, not everything goes somewhere. But, maybe someday that will reemerge. Maybe it won't. I don't know.
Yeah, that's it. My wife and I are business partners, and we were talking about that this morning. I mean, we had a film that we were working on this year. We spent the better part of 6 months working on it. I went on the road and shot, directed documentary with a DP embedded for 2 weeks, and it's not going anywhere. And that happens. And it was very frustrating, and it is still frustrating. But the experience was worth it, not in some woo-woo sense, but in the actual tactical, practical, like, hey, we went out and did this. Like, that was the work. That's the work. And we got to do it, and hey, we'll move on to the next one. Awesome. Jake, I really appreciate your time. Appreciate the words, appreciate the books. I've got Hellfire Club back there. Have not read that series yet, but I'm starting with that one now that I'm finished with this and another novel that I just recorded an episode for yesterday. So looking forward to diving into something that's not for the podcast. Looking forward to reading that.
Thank you so much. Well, this has been a real pleasure. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I do ask one open-ended question at the end of every episode. Usually guests are veterans, so feel free to answer this question however you like, from whichever perspective you like. But what's on your heart and your mind for our community right now? Could be a piece of advice, something you want to get off your chest, or something you want to reiterate that we've talked about today. But Jake, what's on your heart? What's on your mind?
So I'll say this, working with the veterans for this book, for Race Against Terror, has been, it's been different than working with the veterans I did for The Outpost, which came out in 2012. Is that, so there's about a decade and change between, and that these veterans, these most recent veterans, are much more open and honest and willing to talk about the need for mental health care. And I find that incredibly heartening and powerful. So many of them talk about like how difficult their lives were when they came back, and their marriages that broke up, and the treatment that they sought or the help that they sought, and how they had PTSD then and now they don't, or whatever. And I find the honesty about trauma to be incredibly heartening and positive. Obviously, I wish that nobody had the trauma to begin with, but the openness about it, the confidence that there really is no one, at least no one worth caring about, looking down on that. It's all there, but for the grace of God go I. It's all, oh my God, these brave warriors served, and now they have to deal with this. How can I help? And I think that that's a very positive development. I hope my anecdotal experience is not just anecdotal. I hope it is reflective of an overall mind change or a shift in the zeitgeist when it comes to the veteran community and seeking help. Because, there were a number of guys in the Outpost who are not with us anymore for any number of reasons. Some of them because they, took up motorcycle riding and got it because they needed the rush and got into horrible accidents. But I just hope that that's real. I hope that that's an actual thing going on.
It is. The community's been through a lot to get here. There's still a ways to go. It is something that comes up every day on my social media feed. The vast majority of it is positive, though, what you're describing. So it makes those ones that aren't positive that much more difficult. But that is the fuel to keep this going. We've been through a lot. High op tempo for the last 20 plus years. Guys still downrange and overseas doing things now. And I think we're getting to that spot as a community where we are doing what it is that you're saying and what you're seeing, what you're observing. Still a ways to go, and we're still going to get there, but we're going to get there together. And obviously, it's monumentally important to have allies like you on the civilian side of things with a voice, putting these stories out there.
Thank you.
Cool. Jake, appreciate you.
Thank you, sir.
Cheers.